The quantum sensors aboard the collective vessel Starweaver picked up the anomaly 3 light-years from Earth. Captain Zira Vatal, her crystalline form shimmering under the bridge lights, studied the readings with all 4 of her optical arrays. The energy signature was unlike anything recorded in the collective's vast databases. Primitive nuclear fission reactors, combustion engines, and yet, something else, something that made her core resonate with hope. "Helm full stop," she ordered, her melodic voice carrying an edge of urgency. "Deploy long-range observation arrays. Maximum stealth protocols." The Starweaver, despite being one of the most advanced ships in the collective's rapidly dwindling fleet, was little more than a scout vessel now. Once, it had been part of a mighty armada of exploration ships. That was before the swarm came. As the observation data streamed in, Zira's senior analyst, Kex, a being of pure energy contained within an engineered exoskeleton, moved closer to the main display. "Captain, these readings, they're extraordinary. This species, they're fighting themselves." Fighting themselves. Zira shifted her crystalline structure to better process the information. "Explain." "Multiple ongoing conflicts across their planet. Different nations, ideologies, resources." Kex's energy form pulsed with excitement. "But that's not the extraordinary part. Look at their adaptation rate." The displays showed centuries of human warfare compressed into minutes, from spears to swords to gunpowder to nuclear weapons. But more importantly, it showed innovation born from conflict, medical advances, technological leaps, strategic evolution. "They're using warfare to grow," Zira whispered, her crystalline form vibrating with realization. "Every conflict pushes them to evolve, to innovate. They don't just fight, they learn." The swarm had overwhelmed the collective through sheer biological superiority. Their ability to adapt was unmatched, their hive mind processing combat data across billions of drone units simultaneously. The collective's technological advantage had meant nothing in the face of such rapid evolution. But these humans, they evolved differently, not through biological adaptation, but through intellectual and technological innovation. They didn't just adapt, they created new paradigms entirely. "Captain," Kex's voice carried an unusual tremor, "I'm detecting nuclear fusion experiments, early quantum field manipulation attempts, and is that primitive gravity wave generation." "Impossible." Zira moved closer to the display. "Their civilization is barely 2 centuries into their industrial age." "Exactly." Kex's energy form brightened. "They're achieving in decades what took other species millennia. And look at their conflict patterns. They're chaotic, unpredictable, yet somehow effective." Zira's decision crystallized, quite literally, as her form shifted into its most formal configuration. "Send the encrypted quantum burst to High Command. Priority Ultra. Message begins. Potential solution found. Species designation. Human. Recommendation. Immediate contact." The response came faster than she expected. 2 words that would change the galaxy. Contact authorized. As the Starweaver began its approach to Earth, Zira watched the planet's night side glitter with artificial lights. The humans had spread across their world like a beautiful infection, adapting to every environment, thriving in conditions that would kill most species. "They're going to think we're invading," Kex observed as they breached the lunar orbit. "No," Zira replied, watching a cluster of primitive human satellites track their approach. "They're going to think we're challenging them. And based on these readings, that's exactly what they live for." The first human military response was already launching from the surface, primitive chemical rockets carrying nuclear weapons. Crude, but the targeting solutions were surprisingly sophisticated. "Begin broadcast on all frequencies," Zira ordered. "Let's show them something new to adapt to." As the Starweaver's advanced communication systems began transmitting their message of peaceful contact, Zira couldn't help but wonder if she was witnessing the salvation of the collective or its final doom. The humans would either be their greatest allies or their last mistake. The message was simple. People of Earth, we come seeking warriors. The galaxy is dying, and you may be its only hope. Military installations across Earth erupted with activity. Nuclear arsenals were prepped, armies mobilized, and emergency protocols activated. But mixed with the fear and preparation, Zyra's sensors detected something else in the human communications they were intercepting: excitement. "Captain," Kex reported, his energy form fluctuating with amusement, "the humans are already proposing theoretical weapons to use against our ship, including several that could actually work." "Perfect," Zyra replied, her crystalline form glowing with satisfaction. "They're already proving my theory. Send the second message." The broadcast went out. "Your species has achieved in centuries what others took millennia to develop. You've turned conflict into growth, warfare into evolution. We need that capability. The galaxy needs it." The responses from Earth's governments were cautious but intrigued. Humanity had long wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they weren't. And better yet, they were being told they were special. As diplomatic channels opened, and the first human representatives prepared to board the Starweaver, Zyra received another message from High Command. The swarm had just consumed another core world. Time was running out. "Show them everything," the message read. "The fate of all species now rests on humanity's ability to do what they do best: face impossible odds and find a way to win." The human diplomats would soon arrive, and with them, perhaps the galaxy's last hope. Zyra only prayed that humanity's chaotic brilliance would be enough to turn the tide against the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the massive laboratory aboard the Collective's primary research station, her eyes wide, as she watched a holographic display of the swarm's latest attack pattern. Around her, aliens of various species worked at stations filled with technology she was still struggling to comprehend. But while they saw defeat in the tactical display, she saw something else entirely. "You're all looking at it wrong," she announced, stepping forward to manipulate the hologram. "The swarm isn't just adapting. They're playing probability games. Each attack tests multiple strategies simultaneously, but there's a pattern in the chaos." Kex, who had become the primary liaison between humans and the Collective, moved his energy form closer. "Explain, Doctor." Sarah's fingers danced through the hologram, highlighting different attack vectors. "Look here and here. The swarm doesn't just evolve through success. They learn from failure too. But they're learning linearly, following evolutionary paths that make logical sense." "And this helps us how?" asked a Meridian scientist, their liquid metal form rippling with skepticism. "Because humans don't think linearly," Sarah grinned. "We make intuitive leaps. We see patterns and then deliberately break them. The swarm's perfect adaptation is actually their weakness. They can't conceive of imperfect solutions that work." In another part of the station, Marine Colonel James Rodriguez was causing his own kind of revolution. He stood before a group of Collective military commanders, next to a heavily modified version of their standard combat armor. "You've designed your armor to be perfect," he explained, rapping his knuckles against the gleaming surface. "Every system optimized, every response calculated. That's why the swarm beats it every time. Perfect is predictable. And your solution is to make it worse?" asked Commander Vix, their photonic form flickering with confusion. "Not worse," James corrected, "more human. We've added randomization protocols to the shield harmonics, deliberately inefficient power distribution systems, and manual overrides for every automated system. This defies all military doctrine," Vix protested. "Exactly," James smiled. "That's why it's going to work." The integration of human thinking into Collective technology was causing upheaval throughout their civilization. Humans didn't just use the advanced alien tech. They'd modified it, combined it in ways never intended, and sometimes deliberately broke it to create new capabilities. In the station's engineering section, Chief Engineer Maya Patel had reduced a team of Collective engineers to a state of near panic. She had taken their most advanced quantum reactor design and essentially turned it into what she called a controlled failure engine. "The reactor isn't meant to operate in that state," protested Chief Engineer Lix, their crystalline form vibrating with distress. "That's what makes it perfect," Maya replied, adjusting power flows that by all collective understanding should have caused a catastrophic explosion. "The swarm predicts stable systems. This reactor exists in a constant state of near failure, powered by algorithms that make no logical sense but work anyway." The first real test of these human modifications came sooner than expected. A swarm scout fleet entered the Proxima system, expecting to find standard collective defenses. What they encountered instead was something unprecedented. Combat footage showed collective ships performing maneuvers that should have torn them apart, their modified reactors pulsing with controlled chaos. Human-modified combat armor allowed soldiers to survive attacks that their systems rated as impossible to survive. And through it all, human tactical controllers coordinated the battle with a combination of strategic planning and pure intuition that the swarm's hive mind couldn't predict. "This is madness," Zyra observed from the command center, watching as human innovations turned a routine swarm victory into a confused rout. "No," Kex corrected, his energy form pulsing with excitement. "This is humanity. They're not just fighting the swarm. They're changing the rules of what's possible." The battle ended with the complete destruction of the swarm scout fleet. More importantly, analysis showed that the hive mind's attempts to adapt had actually made its forces less effective. They couldn't process the illogical success of human modifications. In the aftermath, Sarah Chen stood before the collective's High Council, presenting her findings. "The swarm adapts through perfect evolution, always taking the most efficient path. But humans, we take shortcuts. We make mistakes and turn them into advantages. We defy evolution itself through sheer stubborn creativity." The council chambers were silent as the implications sank in. The collective had sought warriors, but what they'd found was something far more valuable: innovators who could think beyond the boundaries of possibility. "There's an old human saying," Sarah continued, her eyes bright with excitement. "Perfection is the enemy of progress. The swarm seeks perfection in all things. But humans, we're perfectly imperfect, and that's our greatest strength." As news of the victory spread, more collective commanders began requesting human modifications to their ships and systems. The integration that had seemed so chaotic at first was becoming a revolution in warfare. "We're not just fighting the swarm anymore," Zyra observed to Kex as they watched humans and aliens working together across the station. "We're rewriting the rules of what's possible." "Indeed," Kex replied, his energy form shifting thoughtfully. "But the real question is, how will the swarm respond when they realize their perfect evolution is no match for human imperfection?" The answer to that question would come sooner than anyone expected, and it would change the galaxy forever. The collective's primary shipyard was unrecognizable. Where once pristine vessels had been manufactured according to precise specifications, now controlled chaos reigned. Hybrid ships bristling with both collective technology and human innovations filled the massive construction base. Admiral Helena Santos walked through the facility with Zura and Kex, her dark eyes gleaming as she observed the transformation. 6 months ago, you couldn't convince a collective engineer to install a manual override. Now look at them. She gestured to a nearby bay where a crystalline engineer was working alongside human technicians, deliberately introducing controlled flaws into a quantum shield matrix. The resulting shield would be technically less efficient, but would create unpredictable resonance patterns that the swarm couldn't analyze. "The collective is evolving," Zyra observed, her crystalline form shifting in what Helena had learned was amusement, "though perhaps not in ways we expected." "Evolution isn't always about becoming better," Helena replied, pausing to study a holographic battle projection. "Sometimes it's about becoming different." The projection showed the latest engagement with the swarm. Collective ships, modified with human innovations, performed maneuvers that defied conventional physics. Their weapons fired in seemingly random patterns that somehow formed perfect healing fields. And through it all, human tactical controllers coordinated the chaos with an intuition that the swarm's hive mind couldn't predict. Report from the Arcturus front, Kex announced, his energy form pulsing with excitement. The new hybrid fleet just engaged a major swarm force. They're using the quantum uncertainty drives. The quantum uncertainty drive was perhaps the perfect symbol of human influence on collective technology. It deliberately introduced quantum fluctuations into the ship's drive system, making its movements impossible to predict, even by its own crew. The collective had considered it madness until they saw it in action. "Show me," Helena ordered, and the battle projection shifted. The hybrid fleet moved like a swarm of angry wasps, their paths defying traditional combat logic. Some ships appeared to be in multiple places simultaneously thanks to the quantum drives. Others seemed to flicker in and out of reality as their modified shields created localized temporal distortions. "The swarm is attempting to adapt," Kex reported, monitoring the battle data. "But their adaptations are ineffective." Helena smiled, because they're still trying to find the pattern. They don't understand that the pattern is that there is no pattern. The battle ended in another victory, but Helena's satisfaction was tempered by worry. The swarm was losing battles now, but they hadn't survived this long by being stupid. They would be analyzing these defeats, learning, planning something new. In the station's strategic command center, Dr. Chen was working with a team of human and collective analysts to study recent swarm behavior patterns. The wall-sized displays showed battle data from hundreds of engagements, each one a testament to the evolving nature of the war. "They're changing their tactics," Sarah announced as Helena entered the room. "The swarm isn't just trying to adapt anymore. They're trying to understand." "Explain." Helena moved closer to the displays. "Look here." Sarah highlighted several recent battles. "They're sacrificing forces deliberately, testing our responses. They're not just gathering combat data. They're studying how we think." "Can they?" Zyra asked, her crystalline form shifting with concern. "Can the swarm learn to think like humans?" "No," Sarah replied confidently. "But they might learn to predict us, which could be just as dangerous." The warning proved prophetic. 3 days later, a swarm fleet attacked the Proxima defense line using tactics that seemed eerily familiar. They weren't just adapting anymore. They were copying human unpredictability. "This is what we feared," Kex observed as they watched the battle unfold. "They're evolving beyond simple adaptation." But Helena was smiling. "No, this is what we hoped for. They're fighting like they think we fight, but they're still thinking like the swarm." She opened a command channel to the hybrid fleet. "All ships, implement Chaos Protocol Delta. Let's show them the difference between copying chaos and creating it." What followed was a battle that defied description. The hybrid fleet seemed to abandon all pretense of strategy, each ship acting independently yet somehow part of a greater whole. Human tactical controllers coordinated their actions using what they called tactical intuition, a combination of gut instinct and pattern recognition that no artificial intelligence could replicate. The swarm's attempt to mimic human unpredictability crumbled in the face of genuine chaos. Their carefully calculated randomness was no match for true human innovation. As the last swarm ships retreated, Helena turned to her alien colleagues. "The swarm thinks chaos is a tactic. For humans, it's a way of thinking. They can copy our methods, but they can't copy our minds." But even as they celebrated this victory, Sarah Chen's words echoed in Helena's mind. The swarm was learning, evolving in new ways. They needed to end this war soon, before the hive mind found a way to truly understand human unpredictability. "We need something new," Helena announced to her command staff. "Something so crazy, so fundamentally human, that the swarm won't just fail to predict it. They won't even recognize it as a strategy." "What did you have in mind?" Zyra asked. Helena's smile was both brilliant and terrifying. "Tell me, how does the swarm handle paradoxes?" Deep within the captured swarm vessel, Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her readings in disbelief. After months of studying swarm technology, they'd finally managed to capture an intact neural node. What she found inside changed everything. "This can't be right," she muttered, running the analysis again. Behind her, Admiral Santos and Captain Zera waited tensely. The neural node, a crystalline structure that pulsed with alien energy, sat in a heavily shielded containment field. "What did you find?" Helena asked, noting the scientist's unusually pale complexion. "They're not just a hive mind," Sarah said, turning to face them. "They're us. All of us. Every species they've consumed. Their consciousness, their memories, their knowledge. It's all still in there. Still aware, still thinking." Zyra's crystalline form vibrated with shock. "That's impossible. The swarm processes organic matter into drone units. There's nothing left of the original beings." "That's what we thought," Sarah agreed, pulling up complex neural scans. "But look at these patterns. The swarm doesn't just absorb biomass. It incorporates consciousness. Every drone contains fragments of every being they've ever consumed. It's not just a hive mind. It's a collective consciousness of entire civilizations. By all the stars," Kex whispered, his energy form dimming with horror. "Our lost worlds are still aware," Sarah confirmed, "trapped inside the swarm's neural network. And that's not all." She highlighted a particular section of data. "The swarm isn't just storing these consciousnesses, it's using them. Every adaptation, every evolution, it's drawing on the combined knowledge and experience of every species it's consumed." Helena's expression hardened. "So when we've been fighting the swarm, we've been fighting against the processed minds of countless civilizations," Sarah finished. "Their perfect adaptation comes from having access to the combined intellectual and creative potential of every species they've absorbed." The implications were staggering. The swarm wasn't just an enemy. It was a prison for billions of enslaved minds, forced to turn their collective knowledge against the surviving free species. "But this changes everything," Zyra said, her crystalline form shifting rapidly with agitation. "If the consciousnesses are intact, we have to find a way to free them." "That's not all," Sarah continued, her voice dropping lower. "I've identified why they can't fully replicate human unpredictability. The swarm's neural network requires consensus to function. Every action, every adaptation, has to be agreed upon by the collective consciousness. They can't handle true chaos because they literally can't agree on completely unpredictable actions." Helena began pacing, her military mind already racing with implications. "So they can copy our tactics, but they can't fully embrace chaos because their very nature requires order and consensus." "Exactly," Sarah nodded. "And I think I know how we can use this against them." "But," she hesitated, "you're not going to like it." The plan, when Sarah finally explained it, was met with stunned silence. It was audacious, borderline insane, and ethically questionable. It would require sacrificing some of humanity's most closely held principles about consciousness and free will. "You want to what?" Kex asked, his energy form flickering with disbelief. "We inject a modified version of human consciousness into their neural network," Sarah repeated. "Not to be absorbed, but to act as a virus. Human minds, stripped down to their most chaotic, creative elements, programmed to spread discord and unpredictability throughout their collective consciousness." "You're talking about weaponizing human minds," Helena said quietly. "Turning our own consciousness into a weapon." "Yes," Sarah admitted. "Volunteers only, of course. We'd need people willing to have their minds digitized and modified, knowing they'd be sacrificing themselves to corrupt the swarm from within." "This is monstrous," one of the collective counselors protested when the plan was presented. "You're suggesting we fight consciousness slavery with consciousness warfare." "We're suggesting we fight fire with fire," Helena countered. "The swarm turned absorbed minds into weapons against us. We're proposing to do the same thing, but with willing volunteers." The debate raged for days. The collective, for all its advanced technology, had strict ethical protocols about consciousness manipulation. But humans, with their capacity to rationalize the unthinkable in the name of survival, saw it differently. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," Helena argued in the final council session. "We're fighting to free billions of enslaved minds. Sometimes you have to embrace the darkness to serve the light." In her lab, Sarah continued refining the process, knowing that if the plan was approved, she would be among the first volunteers. The thought of sacrificing her physical form to become a chaos agent inside the swarm's neural network terrified her. But the alternative, letting countless consciousnesses remain enslaved, was worse. "Have you considered," Zaira asked her privately, "that this might be exactly the kind of human unpredictability that makes your species so unique? The willingness to sacrifice your very consciousness to save others." Sarah smiled sadly. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just human stubbornness. We've never been good at accepting no-win scenarios." As the debate continued, the swarm pressed their advantage, perhaps sensing that something was changing. But their attacks felt different now. Knowing that each drone contained the enslaved minds of countless beings gave each battle a new tragic dimension. "How long?" Helena asked Sarah, watching another battle unfold on the strategic displays. "The consciousness modification process will be ready in 3 days," Sarah replied. "After that, it's up to the volunteers." Helena nodded grimly. They were about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. But facing an enemy that enslaved consciousness itself, perhaps only something this extreme could turn the tide. "Send out the call for volunteers," she ordered. "It's time to show the swarm what human chaos really means." The consciousness transfer chamber hummed with energy as Dr. Sarah Chen made her final preparations. Around her, 11 other volunteers, scientists, soldiers, artists, and dreamers, prepared for what would be their final moments in physical form. "Remember," she addressed her fellow volunteers, "once we're inside their neural network, we'll have to act fast before the swarm's consciousness consensus can identify and isolate us. The modified quantum processors will protect our core identities, but everything else." She paused. "Everything else will become part of the chaos we're going to unleash." Admiral Helena Santos watched from the control room, her face a mask of controlled tension. The plan was simultaneously humanity's most brilliant and terrible creation, a symphony of chaos conducted through sacrificed human consciousness. "The swarm fleet is in position," Kex reported, his energy form subdued. "They took the bait. They think this facility is developing new quantum shield technology. They'll realize too late what we're really doing," Zaira added, her crystalline form shifting in complex patterns of worry and hope. The 12 volunteers took their positions in the transfer chambers. Each wore a small quantum processor designed to protect their core consciousness while allowing their minds to fragment and spread through the swarm's neural network. 30 seconds to transfer," the system announced. Sarah looked around at her fellow volunteers one last time. They had all written their goodbyes, made their peace. They were about to become something that had never existed before, willing chaos agents in an alien neural network. "Beginning consciousness transfer," the computer announced. "Target swarm vessel in range." Neural connection established. Sarah felt her mind begin to dissolve, fragment, scatter. But instead of fighting it, she embraced the chaos, let herself become pure creative potential. The last thing she saw with physical eyes was Helena's salute through the control room window. Then she was inside the swarm's neural network, and everything was different. The consciousness collective of the swarm was vast beyond imagining. Billions of minds linked together in perfect, ordered harmony. Sarah felt the other volunteers scattered through the network with her, their protected core consciousness maintaining their mission while their fragmented aspects began to spread. And then they began their work. Inside the neural network, the human consciousness fragments acted like viral code, introducing elements of chaos, creativity, and contradiction. Where the swarm required consensus, The human fragments introduced doubt. Where they demanded order, humanity offered chaos. In the physical world, the effects were immediate and devastating. Swarm ships began acting erratically, their perfect formations dissolving into confusion. Some drones stopped responding entirely, caught in logical loops introduced by human creativity. "It's working," Kex reported, monitoring the battle displays. "The swarm fleet is losing coherence. Their neural network is experiencing cascading failures." But inside the network, Sarah and the other volunteers discovered something unexpected. The enslaved consciousnesses, trapped for so long in the swarm's collective, recognized them. More importantly, they began to remember themselves. The imprisoned minds, Sarah managed to communicate back through their quantum link. "They're waking up. Our chaos isn't just disrupting the swarm, it's reminding them who they are." The effect snowballed. As more enslaved minds awakened to their individuality, the swarm's neural network began to collapse under the weight of billions of beings suddenly remembering they were not meant to be part of a forced collective. "Multiple swarm vessels self-destructing," Helena announced, watching the tactical displays with amazement. "Others are simply shutting down. The hive mind is losing control." Inside the network, Sarah felt the change spreading faster than even they had hoped. The human consciousness fragments weren't just creating chaos. They were sparking a revolution of identity among the enslaved minds. But the swarm fought back. The core consciousness that had driven their expansion for so long tried to reassert control, to force consensus back upon the awakening minds. Sarah felt it like a wave of crushing force, trying to stamp out the individuality they had rekindled. "Now," she called to her fellow volunteers, "release everything." The 12 human volunteers unleashed the last of their protected consciousness into the network. Their final gift was pure, unfiltered human creativity and chaos, spreading through the neural pathways like wildfire. The effect in real space was spectacular. Entire swarm fleets either shut down or turned on each other. The neural network, unable to handle the combination of awakening enslaved minds and pure human chaos, began to collapse. "Energy spike in the neural network," Kex warned. "It's going critical." In her last moments of individual awareness, Sarah felt something extraordinary. The enslaved minds, freed from consensus, were choosing to act. Not in chaos, not in order, but in harmony. Billions of individual consciousnesses choosing to work together to end the swarm once and for all. The swarm's neural network imploded. But instead of being destroyed, the freed consciousnesses found themselves preserved by the very quantum processors the humans had designed to protect their own minds. When it was over, the swarm was gone. In its place were billions of freed minds, each housed in quantum processors hastily manufactured by the collective's factories. Among them were the 12 human volunteers, forever changed but still themselves. "I don't understand," Zyra said, watching as the freed minds began to download into new bodies, both organic and synthetic. "How did you know it would work?" Helena smiled, watching as Sarah's consciousness transferred into a new synthetic form. "Because humans understand something the swarm never could. True strength doesn't come from perfect consensus or pure chaos. It comes from billions of individuals choosing to work together while remaining uniquely themselves. The galaxy would never be the same." The freed minds brought with them knowledge and perspectives from countless civilizations. But more importantly, they brought a new understanding of consciousness, individuality, and cooperation. "So what now?" the newly embodied Sarah asked, testing her synthetic form. "Now," Helena replied, "we rebuild, and we remember that the greatest weapon humanity gave the galaxy wasn't chaos. It was the courage to remain individual in the face of forced conformity. The war was over. The swarm was gone. And in its place, a new civilization was about to arise, one founded on the principle that had saved them all. Unity through diversity, strength through individuality, and victory through the courage to remain uniquely oneself."